What if the first global corporation didn't just trade goods, but rewired the very idea of power itself? It all began in silence, in a small London room filled with the smell of wax, parchment, and ambition. 12 men, a mix of merchants and dreamers, gathered to invest in voyages. They would never take voyages that would reshape the world's flow of money, culture, and destiny. From that moment, the world's first great joint stock company was born, and with it, an invisible revolution. They called it simply the company, but within its ledgers lay the architecture of modern globalization. At first, it promised only trade, to bring rare spices, silks, and knowledge from the East back to Europe. But soon, those ledgers turned into laws, and simple commerce became a tool of control. The company learned a profound lesson. Influence was more profitable than invention, and numbers could rule where kings could not. In candlelit offices, clerks wrote figures that would echo across continents. London's docks roared with the thunder of ships carrying goods and greed in equal measure. The River Thames itself seemed to pulse with money. The company's rise wasn't just economic, it was psychological. For the first time, human ambition was organized like a machine. Risk was divided, reward was multiplied, and responsibility was blurred. A single share certificate became a passport to prosperity. People who had never even seen the sea now owned fragments of distant worlds. Stock prices fluttered like heartbeats in the city's taverns. The company had discovered something new: the power of belief. As long as people trusted its promise, it could create wealth from expectation alone. Investors toasted 2 invisible ships, and London's coffee houses became miniature stock exchanges, humming with gossip and speculation. The age of capitalism had begun quietly, elegantly, and irreversibly. The company's offices on Leadenhall Street were more than just headquarters. They were the command center of a new kind of empire, one built not on soil, but on systems. Inside, accountants moved their quills faster than any army moved its troops. They drew maps of supply and demand, balancing entire oceans on paper. Each transaction recorded in those ledgers was a thread in the first global web. Their warehouses, filled with textiles and tea, became cathedrals of commerce. In their silence, you could almost feel the hum of the future. Yet, even as it prospered, the company was built on contradictions. Its leaders spoke of progress while chasing monopoly. They praised competition while systematically crushing their rivals. In its relentless pursuit of efficiency, it transformed entire economies into extensions of itself. Suppliers became subjects, markets became dependencies, and local currencies bent to its rhythm. It was the first entity to prove that wealth could become its own form of governance. But numbers, once unleashed, develop appetites of their own. The company's profits grew beyond comprehension, and with them came new inventions. Marine insurance, futures contracts, double-entry bookkeeping, each designed to harness uncertainty. It turned risk into a resource and unpredictability into profit. The city of London evolved around it, learning to breathe in interest rates and dividends. In dim back rooms, financiers compared ledgers as priests once compared scriptures. Money became a faith, and the company was its first great church. And as its ships crossed oceans, its systems spread ideas, taxation, credit, debt, the very tools that would come to define the modern state. It didn't just trade goods, it exported a worldview. To be modern meant to measure, and to measure meant to own. The deeper its reach, the stranger its reflection became. Ordinary clerks in London handled more wealth than money. Investors, thousands of miles away, shaped policies they never voted for. When storms wrecked ships, markets trembled like nations. A war could now begin or end with a rumor in the exchange. Economies became emotional. Fear and hope themselves suddenly had price tags. The company had successfully turned human psychology into infrastructure. In one of its annual reports, an anonymous accountant wrote, "We have learned to harvest time." Centuries later, economists would call it productivity. But to those living inside the machine, it just felt like a clock that never stopped ticking. Even as it expanded, cracks began to form in its perfect system. Growth demanded more growth. Profits fed speculation, and speculation bred instability. When fortunes faltered, the same governments that had once envied its power now feared its collapse. They discovered that a company could become too big to fail, an idea that still haunts boardrooms today. The rescue plans, the bailouts, the quiet handshakes between politics and profit, they were all rehearsed here first. The company was both a pioneer and a prophecy. It showed the world that wealth without limits eventually becomes its own liability. Yet for all its excess, the company gave birth to progress. Its obsession with order accelerated navigation, mapping, and mathematics. The need to coordinate global trade fostered breakthroughs in communication postal systems, standardized measurements, and even the concept of global time zones. In trying to control the world, it inadvertently connected it. Every modern enterprise, from shipping logistics to financial algorithms, carries a fragment of its DNA. We live inside the shadow of its spreadsheets, the contracts we sign, the apps we use to buy and sell, even the invisible markets that dictate our currencies. They all whispered the same logic that began in that London room centuries ago. When the company finally dissolved, its buildings emptied, but its methods remained. The world it created didn't end. It escalated. Its successors were new names, banks, corporations, networks, yet they operate on the same invisible principles of growth, efficiency, and abstraction. Its ledgers became its clerks became algorithms. The candlelight of commerce became the glow of our screens. And just as kings once bowed to merchants, now nations bow to markets. The actors have changed, but the script remains eerily the same. Today, we speak of globalization as if it were natural, as if it just happened. But it was designed. Its prototype was drawn in ink, signed with wax, and powered by a collective faith in arithmetic. That is the company's true legacy. The idea that the world itself can be managed like a business. In its rise and fall, we see both the promise and the peril of human innovation, now a genius for creation, shadowed by our insatiable hunger for more. And maybe that is the real story it left behind. Not just a cautionary tale of greed, but a mirror held up to our own age, reminding us that every empire of land, of ideas, or of data begins the same way, with a small group of people who believed they could calculate the future. So, that leaves us with a question. If the first global company changed the world by mastering trade, who will change it next by mastering us? Thank you for watching. If this story made you think, please consider liking this video and subscribing for more journeys into the systems that shape our world. See you next time.